Right now, across every major city in this country, there are brand new cars sitting on dealership forecourts that nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, wants to buy. We are talking 120, 150 days of unsold inventory baking in the Australian sun, with floor plan interest bleeding dealers dry every single morning they open their doors. The manufacturers are panicking, the sales managers are sweating through their cheap suits, and the Australian public has quietly, decisively walked away. Today we are counting down the 8 new cars rotting on dealer lots across Australia in 2026, and we are going to tell you exactly why. Before we get into the list, you need to understand what is actually happening to the Australian new car market right now, because this is not a minor slowdown, this is not a blip. What we are witnessing in 2026 is a full structural collapse of consumer confidence, and the numbers are genuinely terrifying if you are a manufacturer or a dealer principal. Here is how a dealership actually works, because most buyers have absolutely no idea, and the dealers prefer it that way. When a brand new car rolls off a transporter and onto a dealership lot, the dealer does not own it outright. They borrow money from the manufacturer's finance arm to fund that inventory. Every single day that car sits unsold, the dealer pays interest on it. This is called floor plan financing. Under normal, healthy market conditions, a dealership should be turning its inventory over in roughly 30 to 45 days. That is the sweet spot. That is where the profit lives. Right now across Australia, we are seeing dealerships sitting on 120, sometimes 150 days of supply. Do you understand what that means? It means some of these brand new cars have been sitting on the lot longer than a standard pregnancy, longer than a footy season. The floor plan interest is absolutely devouring the dealers' margins. They are not making money, they are hemorrhaging it, and the reason is brutally simple. The cost of living crisis has fundamentally changed what the average Australian is willing to sign their name to. Mortgage repayments have exploded, grocery bills have doubled, power bills are obscene. And when a family sits down at the kitchen table on a Sunday night and looks at a 7-year finance contract on an $80,000 vehicle, the answer increasingly is no. A hard, clear, unambiguous no. The consumer has woken up, and these 8 vehicles, for very different but equally damning reasons, have been left behind. Let us get into it. Number 8. The MG ZST and ZS EV. Look, I want to be fair here. I genuinely do. When MG re-entered the Australian market as a Chinese-owned brand under SAC Motor, the value proposition on paper was genuinely hard to argue with. A brand new small SUV for under $30,000, drive away. A full electric variant for under $45,000. In a market where everything else had gone completely insane on price, the MG looked like the rational choice. And for a while, it was moving. The early sales numbers were solid, people were walking onto lots seeing the price and signing on the same day. But here is what happens with a bargain that seems too good. Eventually the people who bought them start talking to the people who are thinking about buying them, and what they are saying right now is not pretty. The resale value on MG product in Australia has fallen off a cliff that makes Niagara Falls look like a guttering drain. We are talking about 3-year-old ZSTs losing 50, sometimes 55% of their original value. That is not depreciation. That is evaporation. You do not own an asset. You own a receipt for money you will never see again. For the ZS EV specifically, the battery replacement conversation is killing sales stone dead. The battery pack in these early generation Chinese EVs is not a cheap component. Replacement costs in Australia have been quoted between $12,000 and $18,000 depending on the variant. The warranty covers you for a period, but the moment that coverage expires, you are holding a vehicle with a ticking financial clock embedded directly into its most critical and expensive component. And then there is the deeper issue that nobody at the dealership will ever raise at the point of sale. What happens when SAIC decides the Australian market is not profitable enough to maintain a genuine parts and service network? What happens to your vehicle's software when the over-the-air update pipeline goes quiet? We have already seen this story play out with other budget brands in this market. The buyers of those vehicles are still waiting for parts that will never arrive. The MG might be cheap to buy. It is the cost you cannot see yet that should terrify you. Number 7. The Nissan Navara D23 2025 update. I almost feel sorry for the engineers who worked on the 2025 Navara refresh. Almost. They gave it a sharper front end, new infotainment, tweaked suspension calibration, fresh stitching on the seats. You can almost picture the product planning meeting where someone stood up and said, right, new face, new start, nobody will remember. They were wrong. Here is the brutal reality of trying to rebadge your way out of a reputation crisis. The Australian public does not forget. We are a nation of blokes who have watched mates get stranded on corrugated outback tracks with cracked chassis and blown warranty budgets. We talk, we remember, and we hold grudges against car manufacturers longer than we hold grudges against ex-partners, considerably longer in some cases. The D23 Navara chassis cracking problem is not ancient history gathering dust on a forgotten forum thread from 2017. It is a living, breathing, financially catastrophic reality that played out in driveways, workshops, and small claims courts across this country. Thousands of Australian owners who bought into the Navara dream, who used their trucks for exactly the purpose the marketing department told them they were built for, discovered that the independent rear suspension Nissan installed to improve on-road ride comfort was creating stress fractures in the rear chassis and suspension mounting points under sustained towing load, real loads, normal Australian loads. This was not a rumour. Nissan issued multiple technical service bulletins. They extended warranty coverage. They quietly acknowledged through the bureaucratic language of corporate documentation that something was fundamentally wrong. When a manufacturer extends warranty coverage on a specific structural component, they are not doing you a favour. They are managing the legal exposure of a known problem. There is a significant difference between those two things. Chassis repairs in serious cases were coming in at 5, 10, sometimes 15,000 Australian dollars. We documented a Queensland owner in a previous video whose D23 sustained rear chassis cracking severe enough to affect towing legality at 155,000 kilometres. That is adolescent mileage for a diesel ute that is supposed to be a working tool. That is not acceptable. That is not a one-off bad luck story. That is a pattern. And now, with a freshened front end and a revised infotainment system, Nissan wants you to walk back into the showroom and hand over $45,000 to $60,000. Based on what exactly? Based on the fact that the press photos look good? Based on the fact that the sales manager is telling you they have sorted all the old issues? Watch the used market. Watch what happens to D23 Navaras the moment the warranty clock expires. They flood car sales and Facebook Marketplace like a burst dam. Dealers know it. Experienced buyers know it. The only person who does not know it is the first-time ute buyer being handed a glossy brochure by a man on commission who has a floor plan debt piling up behind him. The 2025 refresh did not fix the reputation, it just gave it a new grille to hide behind. Number 6, the Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross PHEV. Right, deep breath. Because this one genuinely baffles me, and I've been covering the Australian automotive market long enough that very little genuinely baffles me anymore. I want you to picture the exact boardroom meeting where this decision was made. Someone at Mitsubishi, presumably a person in a very expensive suit, who has never driven further than 40 kilometres from a capital city in their life, stood up and said, "You know what Australia needs? A plug-in hybrid crossover. A vehicle that relies on accessible, reliable, widespread charging infrastructure to deliver on its core value proposition. Let us sell that to a continent, a literal continent, a place where people routinely drive further between fuel stops than most Europeans drive in a week. That was the plan. That was the product. That is the Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross PHEV. Now I want to be precise here because I am not anti-hybrid and I am not anti-EV. The plug-in hybrid concept in the right conditions, with the right infrastructure, in the right geography, makes genuine engineering and economic sense. A PHEV in the Netherlands makes sense. A PHEV in suburban Tokyo makes sense. A PHEV in a country where the distance between some regional towns is longer than the entire electric range of the vehicle is a fundamentally different proposition, and Mitsubishi either did not understand that or decided not to care. Here is the physics of what happens when a PHEV owner cannot charge regularly, and in Australia, outside Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, that is an enormous percentage of the ownership base. When the battery is flat and the vehicle is running purely on its petrol engine, you are not driving an efficient hybrid. You are driving a heavy petrol car. A heavy petrol car that is lugging around an expensive inert battery pack, a complete electric motor assembly, a complex dual drivetrain control system, and all the wiring and thermal management infrastructure that holds it together. The fuel economy numbers that looked so attractive in the brochure, the figures the salesman pointed to with genuine enthusiasm, evaporate. You are getting worse real-world fuel economy than a conventional petrol SUV that costs $15,000 less because you are carrying all that extra weight with none of the electric efficiency benefit, and then the service center calls you with a quote, "You are not maintaining one drivetrain, you are maintaining two complete and entirely different drivetrain systems simultaneously. The petrol engine needs its service schedule, the hybrid battery system needs its own diagnostic checks and fluid management, the electric motor assembly has its own maintenance requirements. The technicians who genuinely understand all of these systems at once, who can diagnose a fault that sits at the intersection of the petrol and electric control modules, are almost exclusively concentrated in the major capital city dealer networks. If you are in Rockhampton, Kalgoorlie, Albury or Tamworth, and something complex goes wrong with your Eclipse Cross PHEV, you are facing a potentially multi-week wait while your vehicle sits in a workshop and the parts and the expertise slowly make their way to you from somewhere more convenient. Dealerships are currently throwing accessories, free servicing, and significant cash discounts at buyers to shift these vehicles. The market has done the sums, looked at the charging map, checked the independent service network outside the capital cities, and politely but completely decisively walked away. Number 5. The LDV Deliver 9 and MIFA 9? Now I know what you are thinking, a van. He is putting a van on the list? Yes. I absolutely am. Because the LDV Deliver 9 and its people mover sibling the MIFA 9 represent something very important. They represent the exact moment when a brand's reputation for unreliability became so loudly established in the Australian market that even a competitive price cannot shift the metal off the lot. We covered LDV's DPF disaster in a previous video. If you missed it, the short version is this. LDV's diesel vehicles in Australia have a documented, widespread pattern of DPF failures occurring at mileages that would make a Toyota Hilux owner laugh out loud. We are talking about DPF replacements being needed at 60, 70, 80,000 kilometers on vehicles that were supposedly bought new. The cost of a replacement DPF on an LDV sits between $3,000 and $4,500. And critically, the problem frequently recurs because the root cause in the driving pattern and regeneration calibration is never fully resolved. Word travels fast in the fleet market. The small business owners, the tradies, the delivery operators, these are the buyers LDV needs for the Deliver 9 to work commercially. And those buyers talk to each other constantly. They talk at the trade counter, they talk at the fuel bowser, they talk in the comment section of every Australian tradie forum on the internet, and what they are saying about LDV reliability has poisoned the well so thoroughly that even the updated Deliver 9 cannot get a fair hearing. Parts availability in regional Australia remains a legitimate horror story. Labour times are high because fewer trained technicians exist outside the capital cities, and resale value on LDV commercial vehicles is now so poor that fleet buyers running basic depreciation models are walking straight past them regardless of the purchase price. The cheapest option at purchase is not always the cheapest option over 4 years of operation. The fleet managers have figured this out. The LDV lots have not emptied out as a result. Number 4, the Ford Mustang Mach-E. Alright, I have to be honest with you. Part of me genuinely feels bad including this one because the Mustang Mach-E is not a terrible vehicle in isolation. It is reasonably well built. The interior is genuinely nice. The performance variants go hard. In another market, in another geography, this car probably makes a lot of sense, but this is Australia. And in Australia, the Mustang Mach-E is the automotive equivalent of bringing a surfboard to the Simpson Desert. Technically impressive, completely wrong tool for the environment. Let us start with the badge, because the badge is a genuine disaster for this vehicle. The Mustang name in Australia is sacred in a way that is almost impossible to overstate. It means a thundering V8. It means a manual gearbox. It means Friday afternoon noise and Sunday morning fuel receipts that would make a financial advisor faint. When Ford took that name, that specific name with all that weight and history behind it, and put it on a mid-size electric SUV, they did not just confuse the market, they actively offended a significant portion of it. The Mustang faithful are not buying it because it is a heresy. The EV crowd is not buying it because they would rather have a Tesla or a BYD. It is caught in a no man's land of its own creation. Then there is the range reality. The official range figures on the Mach-E look acceptable on a city cycle test, but driving in actual Australian conditions, running the air conditioning in 40-degree Queensland heat, driving at highway speeds on actual highways rather than laboratory simulations, real-world range drops meaningfully. And when your nearest fast charger is 120 kilometers away, a meaningful range drop is not an inconvenience, it is a stranding event. Ford is discounting these aggressively. There are deals to be had right now if you want one. The question is whether a discount on the wrong tool makes it the right tool, and the Australian public has answered that question with its wallet. Number 3. The Volkswagen Amarok V6 TDI, NF generation. Here we go. Pull up a chair, because this one is going to sting for a few people in the comments, and I apologize in advance. Actually, no, I do not, because if you are seriously considering spending $80,000 to $95,000 on a new Amarok, you absolutely need to hear this. The NF generation Amarok, built on the Ford Ranger platform following the deepening of the Ford and Volkswagen commercial vehicle partnership, arrived in Australia with enormous marketing momentum. It was bigger. It was more powerful. The interior was legitimately stunning. The V6 TDI motor made all the right noises. On paper, this thing looked like the European luxury ute to finally break Toyota's stranglehold on the upper end of the market, and then the real world happened. The DSG dual clutch transmission, which we have documented extensively in relation to the previous generation Amarok, is still fundamentally incompatible with the way Australians actually use working utes. Sustained towing on corrugated outback tracks, heavy payload on long distance runs, stop-start traffic in Sydney where the DSG generates heat it struggles to dissipate, the shuddering on takeoff, the hesitation under load, the hunting between ratios when the engine is working hard. These are not firmware issues you can fix with an over-the-air update. They are fundamental characteristics of a transmission type that was designed for European driving cycles and has been dropped into an Australian working environment it was never engineered for. Parts pricing on European vehicles in Australia has always been uncomfortable. On the new Amarok, it is genuinely eye-watering. Owners coming out of warranty are receiving service quotes that would make a dentist feel sympathy. And unlike a Toyota or an Isuzu, where independent mechanics across the country are deeply familiar with the platform, Amarok owners in regional areas are often facing the unpleasant reality of driving hours to an authorized Volkswagen dealer because nobody else will touch the warranty implications. Dealerships right now have NF Amaroks sitting on lots with discount stickers that would have been unthinkable 18 months ago. $15,000, $20,000 off. On a brand new vehicle, that is not a sale. That is a distress signal. Buy smart. Number 2. The GWM Haval Jolion and H6 HEV, the Chinese hybrid SUV wave that hit Australian shores over the last 3 years, was supposed to represent the democratization of hybrid technology, affordable vehicles, hybrid efficiency, comprehensive warranties. The promise was compelling. The reality, as the used market is now beginning to reveal, is considerably more complicated. The GWM Haval Jolion and H6 HEV were both positioned as cost-effective alternatives to the Toyota RAV4 hybrid, which has spent years dominating its segment so thoroughly that competitors are essentially competing for the leftover crumbs. And at first, the Haval products moved reasonably well. The value equation looked strong. Buyers who could not get their hands on a RAV4 hybrid due to allocation constraints saw the Haval as a rational substitute. But here is what is happening now, and this is the conversation the dealerships desperately do not want you having with current owners. The hybrid system in these vehicles uses a dedicated hybrid transmission that is genuinely complex and genuinely expensive to service when things go wrong. And outside Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, the number of technicians with proper training and diagnostic equipment to work on these systems is shockingly small. We are hearing stories from regional Queensland and Western Australia of owners waiting weeks for parts, with vehicles sitting in workshops because the local mechanic cannot get the diagnostic software to communicate with the hybrid control module. Resale values have started to slide in a way that should alarm anyone currently financing one. The 5-year ownership cost calculation, when you factor in realistic residual values, hybrid system servicing, and the very real possibility of a major hybrid battery replacement outside the warranty period, starts to look far less attractive than the original purchase price suggested, and the warranty fine print. Read it. Read all of it. Read the section about what voids the hybrid component warranty, and then tell me whether you feel comfortable parking this thing in a dusty outback driveway after a weekend on a dirt road. The GWM warranty team are not the easiest people to negotiate with when a claim gets complicated. I will leave it at that. Number 1. The Nissan Pathfinder T, I told myself I was going to stay calm for this one. I genuinely did. But the Nissan Pathfinder T being parked on dealer lots across Australia in 2026, covered in dust and sticker discount offers, makes me angrier than arguably any other vehicle on this list. Not because it is the worst car here, but because of what it represents, because of what the Pathfinder name used to mean. The original Nissan Pathfinder, the WD21 from 1987, was a legitimate off-road machine. Solid axles, mechanical simplicity, a vehicle that earned its name on tracks that would make modern SUV buyers reach for a paper bag. Through the early generations, the Pathfinder maintained at least a thread of that heritage. It was not a Land Cruiser, but it was honest. It was purposeful. It knew what it was. The current generation Pathfinder T is a 7-seat unibody family hauler with a continuously variable transmission that sounds like a food processor set to maximum when it is asked to work hard. It has no low-range transfer case. It has no locking differentials. It has no meaningful off-road capability beyond what a RAV4 could handle with slightly more confidence. It has absolutely nothing in common with its own name except the badge on the front grille. And Nissan wants $83,000 for the T variant, $83,000 for a soft rotor with a CVT transmission and a 7-inch tablet glued to the dashboard. I just need a moment. Right? I am fine. The CVT transmission is the critical issue here beyond the identity crisis because under towing load, under real sustained highway stress, the CVT in the Pathfinder generates heat in a way that owners and independent mechanics are documenting with growing alarm: fluid breakdown, ratio hunting under load, the early warning signs of a transmission that is being asked to do more than it was fundamentally designed to handle, CVT replacement or rebuild on a vehicle of this size and weight class is not a four-figure conversation. You are looking at $10, $12, potentially $15,000 when it goes. Dealers across Australia are currently sitting on Pathfinder tie stock with 120 plus days of inventory and nowhere to go. They are throwing free service packs, accessories, and significant cash discounts at buyers who are simply not interested. The family SUV buyer in this price bracket has looked at the Pathfinder T, looked at a Kluger, looked at a Prado, and made a completely rational decision that does not involve a CVT and a $90,000 sticker. The Pathfinder T is not just a car that nobody wants to buy. It is a tombstone for a nameplate that deserved a far better ending. So here is where we land. 8 brand new vehicles, tens of millions of dollars of unsold inventory gathering dust on forecourts from Cairns to Perth, sales managers refreshing their inquiry dashboards and finding nothing, manufacturers frantically adjusting their allocation forecasts and pretending in press releases that the market conditions are temporary and external. They are not temporary, and they are not entirely external either. The Australian consumer in 2026 is not stupid. They have been burned. They have watched friends and family sign long finance contracts on vehicles that grenaded before the halfway point of the loan. They have read the forums. They have watched the videos. They have done the maths on depreciation and out-of-warranty repair costs and 7-year finance contracts, and they have arrived at a very simple conclusion. The new car market at current price points and with current mechanical complexity does not represent value. Full stop. The vehicles that are moving right now, the Isuzu D-Max, the Toyota Hilux SR5, the Land Cruiser 70 Series, with its years-long waiting list and zero floor plan dust, they are moving because they have spent decades earning exactly the trust that these 8 vehicles have failed to build. Trust is not built in a marketing suite. It is not built with a 12-inch infotainment screen or a lane departure warning that beeps at you 17 times on a country road. Trust is built at 100,000 kilometers, 200,000 kilometers, when the truck starts first turn in -5-degree snowy mountains mornings and hauls a full load home without drama. The dealerships holding these 8 vehicles are learning that lesson right now, the expensive way. If this video saved you from signing a contract you would have regretted, hit the subscribe button, because I will be here every single time the industry tries to sell you something you should not buy. Stay sharp. Buy smart. And for the love of everything mechanical, read the ownership forums before you walk onto any dealership floor. I will see you in the next one.